Welcome back, Math 2. Today we're working on our Unit 3 review. Now remember, this is a sheet you get to use on your test. I'm not going to have a ton for you to write on here in the video because I want to leave a lot of space for you to write in your own examples. You are also going to be getting a little review packet, which is not required. It's not a homework assignment, but it's for you to practice whatever you think you need to practice. So I'm going to leave a lot of space on here for you to be able to fill in any examples you might need. But here's what we have covered in Unit 3. Okay, so the first thing we covered was adding and subtracting our polynomials. Okay, and what I want you to remember about that is that we are basically combining like terms. Okay, so that would mean a like term would mean that it has the same variable and exponent. Okay, I'll give a small example. So if I have 2x squared plus 7 minus 4x plus 2 plus 6x squared. Okay. Now remember, with the subtraction ones, we want to instead distribute that -1 inside and turn it into a positive, and that would make everything else inside change whether it is positive or negative. Okay. And as far as like terms, so I'm going to look up here. I have 2x squared. The only thing that it is a like term with is this -6x squared. They're the same variable, same exponent. So that would make -4x squared. My 7 will combine with my -2 to make 5. It's a positive 5. And that still leaves me with this -4x that didn't get to combine with anything. Now, one thing I do want to remind you of, this is not the proper way to write your final answer. We want to make sure all of our answers are in standard form, which, if you remember, is when you start with your highest exponent, so it'd still be my -4x squared, but then we work our way down, so I really just need to switch the -4x and the 5. Okay, so your constants, your numbers without variables, should be the last thing you write. Okay, I would maybe leave yourself some space in case you want to add more examples about adding and subtracting, because again, you can use the back of the sheet. Maybe you write smaller than I do. Okay. The second thing that we learned was how to multiply polynomials. Okay. If you remember, for this, there was either a box method or just distributing. Okay, so I'm not going to do any examples because I know a good chunk of you prefer the box or a good chunk of you prefer distributing, and I don't want to have you fill up your paper with a method that you don't personally like to use. Okay? But I just want to remind you, when we are multiplying polynomials, if we have two variables multiplying together, we add the exponents, and we multiply the coefficients. Okay, that's all I really want to remind you of. So again, leave yourself some space to put down some examples. Okay, they can be examples straight off of the review page you're going to get. All right, let's flip over to the back because I want to make sure you have enough room. And the last thing we've spent a lot of time on is factoring, or really solving quadratics. Okay. And again, just a reminder, the reason we solve them or we factor them, what we find is our x-intercepts. Okay, so basically, if we had to graph some of these, that would tell us where the graph crosses the x-axis. It's like, oh, look at that, it crosses here and here. Okay. There's many other names for that. You can call them the zeros of the function or the roots. Most technically correct term, though, would be x-intercepts. Okay. We learned a lot of different methods for solving quadratics, and I'm not going to ask you to do any specific method. We learned 5 different ways. There was square roots, there was basic factoring, you know, where you split it into 2 parentheses. There is the AC method. Okay, that was often used with a box. If you still don't like the box, I've learned another way as well to do it. Besides like the big long parenthesis method. So if you didn't like the box but you like this method overall, please come talk to me. We learned completing the square. And we learned the quadratic formula. So I would say pick 2 to 3 ways that you feel really comfortable with solving, and just really stick with those. For myself, I mean, I'm obviously adept with most of these because I've been doing this a long time, but if I were in Math 2 right now, I would probably pick square roots, the factoring and AC method, and probably the quadratic formula. I'm personally not a huge fan of completing the square. So I'd pick 2 to 3 ways that you are really comfortable with and focus on those. Focus on those methods. How do you solve with those methods? So again, leave yourself some room for some examples. I'm also not going to write down the quadratic formula on this sheet. That's up to you. It is not written on your test, so if you want to use it, you need to write it down. Okay. And then the very last thing that we covered, it was just a one-day thing in your last video and notes, are the different forms. Different forms of quadratic equations. Okay. And you're just going to need to know, like, what kinds of things can the different forms tell you without having to do a ton of work. So there were 3 forms: vertex form, standard form, and a factored form. Okay. So just to recap, the vertex form, it's right in the name. The easiest thing that it will give you without having to do any work would be the vertex. Okay. Standard form, again, without really having to do anything, it will tell you the y-intercept. It's just whatever C is. Okay. And factored form gives you those x-intercepts, what x equals. Okay. So just keep in mind on how can I find some of these different things. Maybe watch that video again or look back at your notes for it. Okay. So again, not a very long video. You are going to get a review packet. I left a lot of it blank so that you can fill in your own examples, whatever's going to work best for you. Maybe you don't need adding and subtracting examples, but you really need some multiplying ones.